we build this as, me talking about balancing faith, family, and career. So I want to talk about that a bit. You'll notice there's some videotaping going on here, and this same production company came out to my house and spent a whole day videotaping me, asking me a number of questions. If you go to the YouTube site, God Revealed, just in this last week, there are literally 32 clips of me answering questions during that session. Many of the questions I knew were going to be raised, many of them I did not know. And one of the questions that I had to pause a bit on and think about a lot was how I coped with these pressures of balancing family, faith, and career. And I want to give you the answers that I gave to that question, maybe even with a little bit more elaboration, in hopes that you will benefit. Now, many of you are late in your career, some of you are retired. Maybe you can't adopt these practices, but I think it's something you'll relate to and you may pass on to others you know. The first thing, which is something I don't recommend and probably most people can't adopt, is I'm one of these people who, for some reason, gets along and survives and thrives on very little sleep. I'm sure some of you can relate to that, but typically less than 5 hours a night, and not always a restful sleep throughout my 35 or 40-year career. And my daily routine, probably the best way to talk about coping techniques, is what my daily routine was and still is to a large extent, is I got up every day at 4 a.m. And I don't think I can remember one time in my life when I woke up to an alarm clock. I mean, I just got up every day at 4 a.m. And I went down to my in-house gym and I rode an exercise bike, stationary exercise bike. And I purposely chose a stationary exercise bike so I could keep my hands free for multitasking. I'm sure you can relate to that, all you type A personalities. I kept my hands free and I pulled out my BlackBerry and I started answering emails I got overnight from our international operations. I started sending emails to my staff. I delegated a lot while I'm riding this bike. And then I decided maybe a year or two after I started that routine that what I would do is connect with the family and start to send messages to each of my 5 children and my wife every day. And I can't say I made every day, but almost every day I'd send a message, and it was usually quite short. Just say hello, how's it going? If I knew something was going on in their life, I'd mention it and ask about it and see how they're doing. Almost never got a response. Unless I said, please acknowledge a receipt of this message, in which case I got a 2-word response, got it. But I knew it really meant something to them, because if there were a couple of days that I was off traveling internationally and I missed the email messages, I'd invariably get a message from one or more of my kids. It's, hey, Dad, what's up? No message today? So they got it, and it meant something to them. Then after finishing the email and the exercise bike, I started to read chapters in the Bible. And initially what I did was I started by looking at the Gospels, and I did a count. There's 99 chapters in the 4 Gospels, and I decided this is my 3-month startup plan, right? So I'd read just one chapter. I resisted the temptation to go farther, and I spent time contemplating and thinking about it. And then I go into my prayer list, pull out the BlackBerry again. I kept the prayer list, still do, on my BlackBerry, and usually intercessional prayer for other people. And I went through that prayer list. So, by 6 a.m. in the morning, every day, before most people were even out of bed, I felt like I had really accomplished something, and I had renewed myself. I had heard from God in the Scriptures, and I had spoken to God in prayer. So this was really quite important to me, and it's a practice I continue today, not always at 4 in the morning, but during the day sometimes at 4 in the morning. But I should mention probably the most important coping technique, family coping technique, which all the people from New York Life that are here today can verify that I talked about this often at New York Life. I had a practice every year of taking each one of my 5 kids on a trip with me alone every year. So it was a great bonding experience, great time together, 5 trips a year, great to plan those out. We had a lot of fun planning it. When they were little, 2 or 3 years old, we could go up 2 miles away to a hotel and get a room in a hotel, and it was a great time with just me and one of my kids. But I continued that until they got out of college, most of them, and even took trips in college, most cities and parks around the country, even some international trips, and there's some stories in the book about those trips. And that's a practice, as I said, that I shared with thousands of New York Life agents and employees, and it's very gratifying to me, even today, 6 years after I retired, that I get very frequent emails, Christmas cards from New York Life people thanking me for sharing that practice, because they, in fact, adopted it themselves, and it has meant a lot to their family experience. And I think even though New York Life is a very successful company, Fortune 100, everybody's AAA, not everybody's, but most rating agencies AAA, and we were number 1 in life insurance sales for, 7 or 8 years in a row. None of that was my legacy to the company. It really was about my faith and my family values. So that really is, one other thing I wanted to mention. I want to talk briefly about bringing God into the workplace. It's a sensitive, difficult subject, not always easy. One of the questions on that YouTube site is, how do you bring God into the workplace if your employer doesn't appreciate that or allow that? And it is difficult, it is sensitive. At New York Life, we had 60-some thousand employees around the globe, and so every imaginable faith was represented. So it was a sensitive issue. But early in my career, I made the mistake, like so many people do, of making worship and prayer a Sunday-only activity. And I think I realized a couple years into my career that I needed God in my life more than that. And I started to invite God into the workplace, largely through prayer. And it's not an exaggeration to say I prayed very often, probably 10 to 15 times a day, but really very short, simple prayers. God, guide me in this tough decision. Help me to think this issue through. Help me to guide my actions and my words so that I act with integrity and with strong ethics. And that really sustained me in the workplace. And I had the trust that, in fact, God would support me in that way, and it gave me a lot of confidence that I was making the right decisions and doing the right thing. And I must say, I never really that never took the form of praying for more compensation or praying for hitting a sales goal or a profit objective. It was never anything like that. It was more about my own behaviors and how I could become a role model. And one more thing before we serve the salad. Probably the best example of sharing faith in the workplace, and some of you in the room may have actually been at some of these meetings. We used to have a lot of annual sales conventions, meetings with thousands of agents, and at one series of those meetings, we had invited the board of directors, 5 members of the board of directors of New York Life, in a group of about 5,000 agents sitting in the front row of this big, huge convention hall. And I did my speech about the business and what was happening with sales and revenues and so forth, and the issues and strategies. I did all that, and at the end I decided I'm going to talk about my 5 priorities in life, and in this order. And so I said, my first priority is my relationship with God. My second is my relationship with my wife. Third is my family. Fourth is my job. And fifth is any leisure activity or volunteer work. So imagine telling the board of directors, president of a Fortune 100 company, saying to his board of directors that the job is fourth on my priority list. Now, I must be honest, though, I did tell them that this is a constant struggle, as I know many of you have, and that often I got that upside down. Not the leisure volunteer stuff, because I rarely had any time for the leisure volunteer work, but the job. What was number 4 would often supplant the others and become number 1. But you know, I think articulating your priorities, maybe yours may be different than mine, but articulating your priorities, putting them in order, and reminding yourself often what they are is a way to begin to rebalance and bring them into the right perspective and the right order.